It looks like you have macular degeneration in your left eye. We have a packet of information to explain the disease and what your expectation of vision loss will be. We can't determine at this point when you will lose your sight, but unfortunately with this disease, it's an inevitability. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't breathe. I don't remember ever feeling so much fear. I had gone into a routine eye exam, something I have done every year. The result was anything but routine. As the doctor left the examining room, my mind caught up to my stomach and a surge of thoughts, questions, and emotions raged. In my 29 years of law enforcement, I couldn't remember ever being scared. I know that I had been scared. Only a psychopath would never be scared, but for the life of me, I couldn't remember a specific event. It seemed like things moved pretty fast, and the necessity to make decisions, solve problems, and keep people safe would quickly override any fear. I could remember being worried, upset, concerned, and yes, scared, but that usually came after the event. Right now, sitting in that doctor's office, I was terrified and paralyzed. I had no idea what would come next. In the science fiction classic novel Dune, Frank Hubert wrote, "Fear is the mind killer." And in that doctor's office, that line kept running over and over again in my head. It's time to start telling our own stories. I'm Steve Kellums, and welcome to Blue Canary. Fear is the mind killer. That statement is as relevant today as it was in 1965 when Frank Hubert published his novel Dune. Paul Atraides, the main character in Dune, quotes from the Litany of Fear in the first chapter of the book. The entire quote is, "I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain." The quote is designed to help you focus through your fear. It recognizes that fear will happen, that you will be scared, but you must not let that fear define you or rule you. You must concentrate through the fear and let your reason win. It also acknowledges that fear will pass, and you will have to live with the actions and consequences of your decisions once it is gone. The number one enemy to effective leadership is fear. Fear is why we fail. Fear is why our people fail. Fear is why our organizations fail. We let fear guide our decisions. We let fear dictate our responses, and we let fear paralyze us from taking action. To develop as an effective leader, we must learn to face our fears and to conquer them. We can do that by relying on the foundations of good leadership, character, integrity, and vision. Character is the individual beliefs and values held by a person. To be an effective leader requires you to understand who you are and why you do the things you do. It's interesting to me that when I ask my students to take a few minutes and describe their character in writing, they can't do it. They struggle, pause, and often look to the other students for assistance. Defining your character is a very singular act, one that must be accomplished by you. No one else can really help. Why do they struggle? It's because they've never sat down and tried to put it into words, the things that are important to them, the things that define them, the things they value the most. Socrates said, "To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom." To be an effective leader, you must first know yourself. This understanding of your own character is a strong moral anchor that will help guide you as a leader. It will aid you when making decisions. It's the one thing you'll fall back on all the time as a leader, so the simple act of writing it down is a powerful beginning to any leadership journey. The next key foundation to leadership is integrity. Integrity is the quality of being honest and of having strong moral principles. I always liked Dr. James Reese's description of integrity. He said integrity was looking forward to the consequences of your actions. There are several key elements to integrity. Honesty is the main one, being honest with yourself and with others. But you must also be consistent. A good leader will be consistent in their responses and decisions. Have you ever had a subordinate say, "I knew you were going to say that to you"? That's not a bad thing. Honesty and consistency builds integrity. Finally, we have vision. It is impossible to lead others when you don't know where you're going. A leader must have a clear vision and then communicate that vision to their subordinates. When everyone knows where we're going, it's much easier to get there. What types of fears do leaders face? Let's take a look at some of the most common fears faced by leaders and issues involving those fears. Fear of being an imposter. Everyone who has ever taken a leadership position has had to face this fear. I'm not ready for this leadership position. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm too young. I'm too inexperienced. I'm not ready for this responsibility. If you've ever thought that, then you're not alone. Imposter syndrome is a common fear shared by leaders and celebrities alike. David Bowie, the iconic musician, once said, "I had enormous self-image problems and very low self-esteem, which I hid behind obsessive writing and performing. I was driven to get through life very quickly. I really felt so utterly inadequate. I thought the work was the only thing of value." Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks Coffee, said, "Very few people, whether you've been in the job before or not, get into the seat and believe today that they are now qualified to be the CEO. They're not going to tell you that, but it's true." And actor Tom Hanks famously said, "No matter what we've done, there comes a point where you think, how did I get here? When are we going to discover that I am, in fact, a fraud and take everything away from me?" This is where the saying, "fake it till you make it," comes from. I have some news for you. You will never be ready for responsibility. You will always doubt your skills. You will always think that you're too young, too old, too slow, too something. Face that fear of being an imposter head on, and when you look back, you'll see only yourself. Fear of being criticized. Channing Pollock, the famous American playwright, said that a critic is a legless man who teaches running. I always love that quote. The fear of being criticized is like being afraid that the sun will rise in the morning. As a leader, you're going to be criticized for your decisions, for your leadership style, for your motivational style, for your communication abilities. Hell, you name it, and someone is going to criticize you for it. There's only one way to avoid criticism, and that is to do nothing. Oh, wait, someone will criticize you for that. As a leader, you will find yourself preparing to make a decision and then pausing to worry about what others will say, how they will receive it, what they might think about it. That is the fear of criticism, and you must face that fear because if you do not, paralysis will kick in, and you will find yourself unable to make a decision. And don't let yourself be fooled. Not making a decision is a decision, and rarely the right one. Fear of being a failure. Fear of failure is another all too common fear faced by leaders. We fear to take the position because we don't want to fail. But failure is how we succeed in life. Without failure, there is no success. Failure is part of growth. When we go to the gym to work out, the goal is to push our muscles to failure so that they'll get stronger in the future. When we go to school, the goal is to face those things we're not good at so that we may learn to be better. The key to success is failure. Michael Jordan famously said, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." Leaders should embrace failure and use it to become stronger and better. However, we are in a profession that does not allow for failure. The admission of failures result in lawsuits and court cases. Our public safety leaders have been taught that failure is the end of their careers and that the fear of failure has caused a massive paralysis amongst decision makers in law enforcement. We have to stop being afraid of failure and start embracing growth and success. Failure is nothing to be afraid of. Fear of being a poor communicator. Good communication skills are essential to leadership, but they are a skill that can be learned, just like any of the other skills we've had to learn to do this job. None of you were born with a pistol in your hand, but you had to learn to be a safe and effective marksman. None of you were born with the ability to resolve conflict in a safe and effective manner, but conflict resolution is one of the main skills necessary for our profession. Stop worrying about being a good communicator and practice. I speak for a living. From the podcast to the classroom, I communicate for a living, but I was not always a good communicator. When I was young, I stuttered and remember having to take speech therapy classes as a child to overcome my stuttering. That led to a mostly quiet education. I preferred reading to speaking and typically avoided anything that required me to talk in front of a group. I then realized that the skill of communication was an important one for my profession. So I got good. You can get good too. Take courses to improve your reading and writing. Look for opportunities to speak in front of groups. Observe others to learn how to create compelling and motivating speeches. And practice often, because practice will build confidence. Fear of making a decision. Police leaders must be capable of making quick, decisive decisions. But when you couple hard decisions with the fear of failure and the fear of being criticized, you quickly end up in paralysis by analysis. The overthinking of the problem to the point that no decision can be made. And as I said early on, not making a decision is in and of itself a decision. Stop trying to be perfect. Winston Churchill said, "Perfection is the enemy of progress." Make the best decision you can with the information you have, and then be prepared to adjust and/or modify your decisions when new information develops. I have always believed that if you master the simple decisions, the difficult ones become easier. Making decisions, like any other skill, needs to be practiced. So take every opportunity to make decisions and learn from those. Fear of taking responsibility. To take responsibility, you must first realize that your leadership is the cause of and the solution to the things that matter. And you can't escape that responsibility by postponing or evading it. The number one reason people are afraid to take responsibility is the lack of confidence. You might find yourself tempted to jump in and take charge when the issue revolves around those things you're good at, the things you have confidence in. But the moment you have to be responsible for something that you're not sure about, everything changes. Police leaders must be jack of all trades. They are frequently asked to take responsibility over things that seem far outside their level of ability. But their position in the community requires them to not only provide leadership over a wide variety of topics, but for that leadership to be effective. How do we overcome the lack of confidence? We learn. Never stop learning. Take every opportunity to improve your knowledge base. Read books, listen to podcasts, take courses, force yourself outside of your comfort zone, and grow. This is where the importance of developing a good team comes into play. As leaders, we should develop our people and build teams that complement our skills so that when the leader lacks the skill or knowledge, a trusted team member is there to help the leader with their confidence. Dave Grossman says, "You don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training." This applies to leaders as well. Fear of not getting it done. It's easy to look at the big picture and feel overwhelmed, like you will never be able to accomplish the task. So most people will never start. Crime is out of control. We are 25% below staffing levels. Our station is crumbling, but we can't afford a new one. Many of the challenges faced by police leaders are big. I mean, very big. It's not just, how do I get these two drunks to stop fighting? It's usually dealing with issues that have been in the works for years, if not decades. Those big challenges can easily overwhelm. The average tenure of a police chief is less than 3 years, so many times they'll look at those big projects and say, why bother? That's poor leadership. That's the fear of not getting it done. There's an old joke. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Leaders need to stop focusing on the results and instead concentrate on the actions you can take right now that will lead to those results.
The Legal Liability Risk Management Institute is the nation's largest provider of liability and risk management services in the United States. Our goal is to help reduce liability, reduce lawsuits, and enhance officer performance. Regardless of the size of your agency, we have a risk management solution. You may contact us at www.llrmi.com or call 317-386-8325.
Fear is the mind killer. All too often, leaders, and especially those in public safety, concentrate on their fears. They try and lead through fear. You cannot be an effective leader through fear. The way to lead is through love. When employees go to work, they do not leave their humanity at home. They need to be appreciated, to feel cared about, to believe their employers, peers, and subordinates respect them, recognize them, and care for them. You will hear that over and over again this season. Leaders must care about their people, truly care about them. Leaders must lead through love. How can you go about leading through love? It starts with understanding them. Make a true effort to understand your officers. Communication is the key here, and it's a two-way street. Not only take opportunities to speak with your officers and subordinates, but take the time to listen to them. Understand their goals and desires, their dreams and motivations. Why are your officers here? What kind of department would they like to work for? What frustrates them in their workday? Understand that we all make mistakes. As a leader, accept that we are all flawed and that your officers will make mistakes. Don't hang them for it, but help them fix those mistakes. Teach them and train them to do better. Model performance for them and make sure they understand the expectations of the department. And forgive them for their mistakes. Mistakes are nothing to get angry about. Repeated or intentional mistakes are your true enemy. Another important aspect of leading through love is courage. You must have courage as a leader. Make sure you use courage and candor when dealing with officer issues. I can't begin to tell you how many times I have spoken with an officer and told them that their performance was unacceptable, only to hear them respond, "I've been doing that for years and nobody has ever told me it was wrong." They aren't lying. Unfortunately, for years, those officers' leaders have been cowards, afraid to address problems with them because they don't want to have the fight. You are paid to have the fight. Refusing to talk with, train, address, and reprimand an officer for unacceptable behavior will only lead to more problems. Courage shows you care, and ultimately, you have to commit to caring. You can't be unapproachable for a year, then send a Merry Christmas email to your staff and call that caring. You can't have your secretary send a birthday card to employees when the calendar prompt pops up on your morning login and call it caring. You can't fake it. Cops smell bullshit faster than a dairy farmer. Caring is being there when it's inconvenient. Caring is knowing your people and what's important to them. Caring is making sure your people get rest when they need it. Caring is eating last. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is unavoidable, but it's not unbeatable. You can defeat fear. We can defeat it by facing it and working through it. We can defeat it by learning from it and growing from it. We can defeat it by learning to love. I sat in that doctor's examination room for about 20 minutes, waiting for him to finish everything up. When he came back in, he had a strange look on his face. He wasn't my normal doctor, so he didn't know anything about me other than what the chart said. Something doesn't look right with this diagnosis. We're only seeing the onset of macular degeneration in one eye, and that's unusual. You're also a little young for this to start developing. I'm curious, do you have a stressful job? All the pent-up fear had me on edge. His question made me snort a quick laugh. You could say that, yeah, I have a stressful job. Do you drink a lot of caffeine? Are you looking in my windows, Doc? I went over the charts again, and I called in a colleague for a second opinion. I don't think you have macular degeneration. There's another eye disease that presents like macular degeneration, and we don't know exactly what causes it, but the indicators are high stress jobs and overuse of caffeine. So I'm not going blind, I asked? If you eliminate stress and lower your caffeine intake, there's a very high possibility that you will be fine and have no long-lasting issues. But if you don't get your stress and caffeine use taken care of, well, he just let that sentence hang there in the air. I put in my retirement paperwork the very next day. And that's the story we have to tell. Thank you for joining. As always, I'm curious what questions you're getting asked. What isn't the news covering? What story needs to be told? Connect with me at bluecanarypodcast@gmail.com.